I'm Charlie Gardner. I'm from Lurgan, and I would have a keen interest in the history of the town. I would have quite a collection of local things, and this includes many local clocks. One of the earliest clocks that's known in Ireland is a clock made by Ezekiel Bullock, who died in 1712. This clock was gifted to me by my father, who bought it, not knowing its significance. It's actually made in the same townland as where we lived, Tullykelly. Then I acquired another clock made by his son, Isaac Bullock, which was only made about 50 metres from where I live currently. The difference is it was made 300 years ago. The next man in the sequence of events in town was Patrick McCabe, who put the first town clock in. The records of Shankill Parish note in 1740 that McCabe was commissioned to put a town clock in the new tower of the church. His son then, Patrick McCabe, it actually had 3 sons who all became clockmakers, but one of them became very famous. James actually went to London in 1772, not as an apprentice or not to work for somebody, but set up his own business, which became known as the House of McCabe. This went on to be one of the most famous clockmaking dynasties that there actually was in London. Made grandfather clocks, bracket clocks, other wall clocks and watches. And in actual fact, Lord Nelson and George Washington were both known to have McCabe watches, which they had acquired, and this was the status that a man born in Lurgan in Market Street acquired in a worldwide market.
Thomas McCabe, he's born in Lurgan in 1739. He's from a family lineage of jewellers and watchmakers. And he comes here to Belfast in 1762 with his brother to set up his own jewellery and watchmaking business. Originally, the business is in Donegal Street, not too far from here. I found a little piece in the Belfast newsletter which had mentioned the fact that McCabe had set up this business, and it actually said that anybody who wanted to buy a watch over the price of 8 guineas could have it on loan for a year before actually they would be required to pay any money. So it didn't seem like a particularly robust business model, but he does seem to have done okay. So yeah, I suppose McCabe's connection with the Charitable Society, he's best known for bringing a small cotton industry here. Actually, the building was designed by a man called Robert Joy, and Robert Joy was an amateur, but he was also an acquaintance of Thomas McCabe. And the two of them, along with a man called Nicholas Grimshaw, who brought cotton to Ireland originally, they go across to Lancashire in England to investigate this growing cotton industry there in England. And in around 1780 then, about 6 years after this place is opened, Thomas McCabe brings back then the idea of a small cotton industry here for the poorhouse, of hand spinning looms, and sort of colloquially referred to as spinning jennies, and we have an example of one still here in the poorhouse. And the idea was that women and children, inmates here at the poorhouse, would be taught how to use these hand looms and to spin cotton to make a few pence on the side, and hopefully break free from the shackles of poverty, which I suppose engulfed the small but growing town of Belfast at that time. So yes, it's arguable actually that, and it has been argued by historians like Eamon Phoenix, for example, that McCabe's small sort of micro cotton industry here in the poorhouse was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution for Belfast. So McCabe, although his business premises is at 6th North Street there in the centre of Belfast, he lived actually just off the Antrim Road here at a place called the Vicinage, and for those who are familiar with Belfast today, that's the site of where St Malachy's College would be today. Called the Vicinage because of its vicinity to the growing town of Belfast. And here at the Vicinage, at his home, he held meetings of some of these societies that I spoke of that he was involved in. He held meetings there of the Belfast Charitable Society and also of another society which their affairs were a good deal more secretive, I suppose it's fair to say, the Society of United Irishmen. And when they first met, then in October 1791, it was Thomas McCabe who presided over that meeting. He was the first chairman, and they went on to have regular meetings at his home at the Vicinage. So being involved in the Society of United Irishmen as he was, that society has been referred to by historians since as one of the most democratic organisations in the world at that time. And they were also fiercely anti-slavery. There was this anti-slavery thread which ran through the Society of United Irishmen. And it'll probably come as no surprise that Thomas McCabe was seemingly at the vanguard of that movement, because he seems to have been involved in absolutely everything else that was going on in old Belfast at that time. He does seem to have been responsible for preventing a slave ship trading company being set up for Belfast at a famous incident in 1786 here at the Exchange and Public Assembly buildings in the heart of old Belfast. So Waddell Cunningham, who was a prominent local merchant and founder actually of the Belfast Charitable Society, along with his business partner Thomas Gregg, another founder member of the Belfast Charitable Society in 1752, they had set up the biggest shipping company in New York in 1775 at the time. And they had an idea. They were going to ship goods to the Gold Coast in Africa, drop the goods off, fill the ships with slaves, take these slaves to the West Indies, fill the ships again then with rum and sugar and cotton, which was coming from these slave plantations, and bring that cargo then to Belfast. They proposed then a public meeting in 1786 at the Exchange, where they were going to invite other businessmen and merchants to get involved in this enterprise. So it's said that Thomas McCabe then walked a short distance from his business premises at 6 North Street to intervene in this public meeting which was going on at the very moment when Waddell Cunningham and Thomas Gregg were inviting local businessmen to come and attach their name to this business proposal. McCabe is supposed to have stood up, interjected by saying, "May God wither the hand and consign eternal infamy on any man who will sign that document." And you'll not be surprised to hear that no man did sign that document, because I think they were afraid that some sort of curse had been placed on them, and so no slave ship trading company for Belfast was set up that day in Belfast because of Thomas McCabe. So we know from the record books here that the family purchased a plot at the new burial ground, as it was known, we know today as Clifton Street Cemetery. But Thomas McCabe then dies in March 1820, and he's buried at the graveyard, which is owned by the Belfast Charitable Society. So I think McCabe's extremely important. He seems to have had his finger in a lot of pies. We've mentioned some of the societies and organisations that he was involved in. Seemingly he's at the vanguard of the anti-slavery movement in Belfast. His interjection at the meeting down at the Exchange, one of the early prominent members here at the Belfast Charitable Society, creating this micro-cotton industry. In many ways he could be held responsible for the beginning of the Industrial Revolution here in Belfast. So he kind of has all these strings to his bow. And I noticed that the Belfast City Council, for example, had planned to give him official recognition for his contribution to the anti-slavery movement here in Belfast. So remains to be seen whether there'll be a statue for someone like Thomas McCabe, but he's certainly worthy of our recognition.